Imagine a world where the next life-saving cancer drug, the technology that could save a loved one, doesn't come from the labs of Boston or Silicon Valley, but from Beijing. That world isn't in some distant future. It's taking shape right now, and the implications are massive for patients, investors, and the entire global economy. Last year, at the American Society of Clinical Oncology's annual meeting, the Super Bowl for the world's top cancer researchers, something unprecedented happened. A Chinese biotech startup, outpace, unveiled a new lung cancer drug that didn't just match but decisively beat Merck's blockbuster treatment. The news dropped like a bombshell in the packed halls of the conference. For years, these conferences were the domain of American and European scientists, with China known mostly as a manufacturing powerhouse churning out generics and copycat therapies. But when outpace's results hit, they didn't just shock Merck or Wall Street. They shocked the entire global order of medicine. The world had underestimated China yet again. Just as the tech sector was reeling from China's shock debut of a game-changing AI chatbot, now it was the turn of biopharma. Shares in Summit Therapeutics, outpace's US-based partner, skyrocketed more than 600%. Suddenly, everyone was asking, how did China go from copycat to the world's most exciting drug innovator? And what does this mean for American pharmaceutical dominance? Sir Pascal Soriot, CEO of AstraZeneca, summed up the new stakes. The two large innovators in our industry today are the US and China. Over the next 5 to 10 years, China is going to emerge as really a driving force for innovation in our sector. Let's rewind. For generations, the US has been the undisputed leader in pharmaceutical innovation, powered by a unique cocktail of massive government research funding, risk-hungry venture capital, regulatory clarity via the FDA, and a culture that fosters invention. America cornered the market in medical breakthroughs. America's pharmaceutical industry is a $1.65 trillion giant, supporting nearly 5 million jobs and dominating every step from blue sky research to blockbuster drugs. Merck, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and dozens more have shaped global healthcare and American soft power more profoundly than almost any other industry. But quietly, almost stealthily, China has been building a rival system. And now, it's arriving on the world stage with breathtaking speed. Driven by top-down industrial policies like Made in China 2025 and Healthy China 2030, Beijing set its sights on owning the future of medicine. The Chinese government poured billions into biotech startups, created tax breaks for research, and, most crucially, overhauled its regulatory system to slash approval times for new drugs. China's National Medical Products Administration, NMPA, reformed how drugs are tested and approved, making it easier and faster for domestic companies to get innovative therapies to trial and, ultimately, to market. Combined with an explosion in scientific talent and a population of over 1.4 billion, meaning a massive patient pool for clinical trials, China's biopharma ecosystem suddenly became ultra-attractive, even for Western investors. The numbers are nothing short of jaw-dropping. In 2024, China officially overtook the US in the number of clinical drug trials, logging over 7,100 compared to America's 6,000. The country now accounts for 23% of all drug candidates in development globally, trailing only the US but closing fast. And it's not just about volume. Chinese cities like Beijing and Shanghai are rapidly expanding their laboratory and R&D capacity, in some projections set to surpass even Boston, the world's current biotech capital. Over the last decade, China's pharmaceutical and medtech patent filings have surged 379%, a patent boom that points to genuine innovation, not just imitation. That transformation is highlighted by the partnerships and deals reshaping the global industry. In 2024, 31% of major pharma licensing deals involved a Chinese partner, up from just 12% 2 years prior. Stifel, a global investment bank, projects that by next year, over 1/3 of pharmaceutical firms' licensed molecules will originate from China. Barclays analyst Shirley Chen notes, Chinese scientists are more accepting of long work hours, facilitating quicker clinical trial execution. With a deep pool of young, ambitious scientists and engineers, fueled by government incentives and a sense of mission, China's biotech sector is producing not just more, but faster. It's not just the quantity or speed. The quality of Chinese research is catching up fast. Chinese biotech companies now regularly showcase world-first results, like outpace's lung cancer breakthrough. Beijing and Innovent Biologics have become global names, especially in oncology, and are striking deals with US and European pharma giants. China has shifted from being a buyer to a contributor of pharma innovation, with China-developed drugs now available globally, says Song Ruilin, executive president of the China Pharmaceutical Innovation and Research Development Association. This rise isn't accidental. In 2023, China invested a staggering $669 billion in research and development, up nearly 11% from the year before. The National Medical Products Administration has approved over 300 indications for 151 novel drugs since 2018. The Chinese biopharma market is set to reach nearly $127 billion within 6 years, with a projected annual growth of 7.8%. But if Chinese biotech is rising, why does it matter so much? Because the world, especially the U.S., finds itself at a crossroads. The U.S.'s pharmaceutical dominance has long relied on two things: homegrown innovation and the world's most fertile business environment for new drugs. Yet today, American biotech faces serious headwinds: sky-high costs, long regulatory approval times, and political turbulence. The U.S. government is grappling with increasing pressure to onshore drug development after the global pandemic exposed supply chain vulnerabilities. But what has investors and scientists even more spooked are signals from Washington. Some lawmakers are fueling skepticism around vaccines, shaking confidence in regulatory stability. Major pharmaceutical CEOs warn that unpredictable U.S. politics makes long-term research bets riskier at home and looks much steadier in China. Vas Narasimhan, CEO of Novartis, was blunt in a recent interview. China is very business-friendly and stable. In contrast, American companies are having to navigate an increasingly chaotic political environment at home. Former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb explains, U.S. drug firms license compounds from China due to lower costs, faster trials. Regulatory reform is needed to maintain U.S. competitiveness. Meanwhile, the U.S.'s own innovation engine is starting to sputter. Venture capital for biotech, once plentiful, is now harder to secure for risky early-stage projects. The FDA, long the global gold standard, is being criticized for slow and inflexible clinical trial procedures. Joe Lonsdale, co-founder of Palantir, warns, the FDA must prioritize speed in clinical research to remain globally competitive and save lives. America is not the only country facing a dilemma. As China ascends, the rest of the world is being forced to reconsider how much to rely on Chinese innovation in such a critical sector. What happens if the world's supply chain for cutting-edge medicines starts to run through Beijing and Shanghai, not New Jersey or Zurich? Senator Todd Young, chair of a U.S. government commission on China, didn't mince words. The U.S. is in a defining competition with China. Biotech is the next critical arena. But even as China's rise accelerates, some experts say it's not yet game over. Cyriac Roding, biotech entrepreneur and investor, argues, China is not yet a biotech superpower, but the U.S. must act to prevent it from becoming one. The stakes are dizzying. If the U.S. loses its innovation lead in biotech, the consequences would reverberate far beyond the lab. Global healthcare, economic power, strategic security, and even national pride hang in the balance. And that brings us to the current moment of high tension and high drama. Pharmaceutical titans, venture capitalists, and government officials on both sides of the Pacific are scrambling to shape the next decade, where the power to cure cancer, battle pandemics, and fuel economic growth could be won or lost based on who leads in biotech. So what are the hard choices facing the U.S. now? Is it possible for America to revitalize its own biotech innovation engine before China pulls decisively ahead? Or are we entering a new era of unavoidable interdependence, where patients, investors, and governments must grapple with both the opportunities and the risks of a world in which China sets the pace for medical progress? What will happen next as the great biopharma rivalry accelerates, and what does it mean for you, for global health, and for the future of opportunity? Now let's look ahead and imagine where this seismic shift in biopharmaceutical power could take us. The coming years are poised to be a battleground, not just for business but for human health itself, a contest where the stakes are measured in lives saved, markets won, and even geopolitical influence. At the heart of this story are possible futures that could redefine not only how medicines are invented and sold, but also who gets access to tomorrow's medical miracles. Picture a world where your next prescription drug is more likely to be discovered, tested, and manufactured in Shanghai or Beijing than in Boston or California. What would that mean for you, as a patient, as an investor, or as an ordinary citizen with a stake in global stability and prosperity? Let's explore 3 likely scenarios shaping up right now. First, the scenario we could call the Chinese century. In this future, China's momentum only accelerates. Their biotech market, already tracking to reach more than $120 billion by the end of this decade, becomes the go-to engine for drug discovery worldwide. U.S. companies, under pressure from rising R&D costs and slower approval processes at home, increasingly look to Chinese partners not just for manufacturing, but for cutting-edge science itself. Imagine a lung cancer patient in Paris or Sao Paulo, whose survival depends on a breakthrough therapy designed in a Hangzhou lab and manufactured by a Chinese pharma giant. Even the world's biggest pharmaceutical names, like AstraZeneca or Novartis, are competing to license molecules born in Chinese research parks. But there's a flip side. In this scenario, Western nations become more dependent on Chinese supply chains, not just for basic medicines, but for the next generation of cell therapies, gene editing tools, and AI-driven personalized medicine. Any disruption, whether political, economic, or technological, could mean critical medicines suddenly become unavailable or unreliable. As Cyriac Roding, a leading entrepreneur, warned, China is not yet a biotech superpower, but the U.S. must act to prevent it from becoming one. The window to act is closing fast. Now consider a second future, the Great Collaboration. Here, rather than drifting into a biopharma Cold War, the U.S. and China forge a complex web of partnerships. Each side brings unique strengths. American companies offer decades of regulatory experience and a tradition of groundbreaking research, while Chinese firms contribute speed, scale, and dazzling efficiency. For example, clinical trials that once took years in the U.S. are now fast-forwarded in China, where regulatory agencies like the NMPA have approved hundreds of new drug indications in just a few short years. As Shirley Chen, a top Barclays analyst, put it, Chinese scientists are more accepting of long work hours, facilitating quicker clinical trial execution. Opportunities abound. If the U.S. and China work together, the world could see revolutionary therapies reach patients faster, at lower cost. Diseases that once seemed incurable, aggressive cancers, rare genetic disorders, major infectious threats, might be conquered more quickly with combined expertise. Of course, collaboration brings new risks, IP disputes, data privacy battles, and the ever-present fear that one side could pull out or turn inward during a crisis. Regulators would need to be vigilant to ensure that patient safety, ethical standards, and fair market practices keep pace with the speed of science. And finally, the third scenario, America strikes back. Faced with the prospect of falling behind, the U.S. government doubles down on its traditional strengths. Funding for NIH and basic science surges, and Congress passes new laws to turbocharge the FDA's approval process, cutting red tape and bringing the U.S. back to the head of the line. Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner, put it bluntly, U.S. drug firms license compounds from China due to lower costs, faster trials. Regulatory reform is needed to maintain U.S. competitiveness. If America can harness its innovative spirit, streamline regulation, and incentivize domestic manufacturing, it may yet reclaim leadership in biotech. In this world, Boston and San Francisco stay global biotech capitals as Beijing and Shanghai rise to join them, not surpass them. U.S. companies invest heavily in next-generation fields like AI-driven drug design and advanced genomics, while foreign talent is welcomed rather than spurned. Crucially, this approach isn't just about beating China, it's about ensuring that life-saving therapies continue to emerge from the world's most open, creative, and ethical research environments. But it would require leadership, vision, and a willingness to rethink everything from patent law to immigration policy. So, which of these futures will become reality? Most experts agree that it won't be just one. Instead, we'll see a messy, evolving mix, competition in some areas, deep collaboration in others, and periodic flare-ups of political tension that could reshape markets overnight. Now, what does this race mean in practice, for you, the average person far from the boardrooms or laboratories? First, there's hope. The fierce pace of innovation means that treatments for everything from cancer to rare diseases will, in theory, arrive faster and potentially cheaper. The old monopoly of Western drug makers is being challenged, and as more players join the field, prices could drop and access could widen. That's great news for millions who currently can't afford or obtain modern medicines. Second, caution. With new innovation comes new uncertainty. Supply chain dependencies highlighted by recent pandemics show how fragile medicine access can be, especially if geopolitics interferes. If future medicines are concentrated in just one region of the world, a single crisis, trade wars, sanctions, or even cyber attacks could put entire populations at risk. Third, there's a lesson in adaptability. For companies and professionals, the game is changing. It's not enough to rely on old models or established markets. Investors should look for firms that are building global partnerships, not just regional empires. Biotech startups need to be ready to jump regulatory hurdles in multiple countries, not just the US or Europe. And for the patient, expect change. Soon you may find your doctor prescribing you a drug developed by a company you've never heard of, in a country whose language you don't speak. That's not something to fear. It's a sign that innovation is becoming truly global. But it also means you need to be informed about where your medicines come from, how clinical trials are conducted, and the ethical standards behind your treatment. So what should you do with all this information? Stay curious. Follow the news about new drug approvals, not just at home, but abroad. Ask your doctors and pharmacists about the origins of your medications. And if you're investing, look for companies that are bridging East and West, not just taking sides. There's one more thing, the big secret the world's been slow to admit. China's rise isn't just a threat or a challenge, it's also a tremendous opportunity. By breaking the old monopoly of Western pharma, it's forcing every player to up their game, to innovate faster, and crucially, to think globally. In this era, the winners won't be the biggest, but the most adaptable, the ones who build bridges, not walls. To conclude, the US stands at a crossroads. Responding to China's biotech ascent isn't simply about rivalry. It's about making sure that innovation, safety, and access to medicines expand for everyone, everywhere. The most successful countries and companies will be those that embrace global collaboration, invest in speed and quality, and never lose sight of the ultimate goal, improving human life. So, which future do you want to see? One where innovation is walled off by borders, or one where breakthroughs are shared and lives are saved in every corner of the globe? Let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts in the comments. What excites or worries you most about the biotech race? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. And here's a final thought to ponder. While all eyes are on the US-China rivalry, some of the most promising biotech startups are popping up in places you'd never expect.